The day I found out I'd wasted my life, my sister was lying on the asphalt of a grocery store parking lot with a half-empty bag of oranges beside her. I'd been 3 spaces away when it happened. I heard the sound before I saw her, a sudden absence of sound. Actually, the way a conversation stops when something goes wrong. And when I turned, she was already down, one knee bent beneath her, eyes closed, the oranges rolling slowly away from her hand in different directions like they were trying to escape. I was at her side, before I'd made any conscious decision to move. She was breathing. Her pulse was there when I pressed my fingers to her wrist, fast, thin, but there. I called 911 with one hand and kept the other on her arm and talked to her in the flat, practiced voice I had developed over decades of exactly this kind of moment. The voice that was supposed to communicate calm when I was not calm at all. The paramedics came. They took her to St. Matthew's. I followed in my car. I called our parents from the hospital waiting room. My father picked up on the 4th ring, which meant he was either somewhere loud or somewhere he didn't want to be interrupted, or both. I told him Emma was in the ER. He said they'd come as soon as they could. I sat in a plastic chair and watched the doors and waited, the way I had been waiting for things in hospital waiting rooms for most of my adult life. What happened next, I was not prepared for. Not because it was dramatic, not because it was loud or sudden or cinematic, because it was the opposite of all of those things. The doctor who came to find me was young, younger than me, which had started happening recently in ways I found quietly unsettling. He had her chart in his hand, and he looked at it, and then he looked at me and he said, in a voice entirely without alarm, "So your sister passed out. That can happen with dehydration, low blood sugar, a lot of things. She's stable. She's fine." He glanced at the chart again. "I do want to ask you something, though, because I've been looking at her history here and I want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly." He looked up. "Why do you think your sister is seriously ill?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. He said it again, not unkindly, just as a genuine question from someone who was confused by something he was reading. "Her records go back years, but I'm not seeing anything that would indicate a chronic life-threatening condition. I'm seeing a premature birth with some early complications that resolved, and then a lot of follow-up visits for He tilted his head. "For things that seem to have resolved too." I sat in that plastic chair. The fluorescent light hummed above me, and something inside me, something I would not be able to name for weeks, began to come undone. To understand what happened in that waiting room, you have to understand where I came from. Not geographically, not even really in terms of family, not yet. You have to understand what it felt like to grow up being told, constantly, and without variation, that someone you loved required your specific presence to survive. My sister Emma was born 8 weeks early, on a Tuesday in March when I was 8 years old. I remember the morning my parents left for the hospital, because I was the one who made myself breakfast, which I'd never done alone before. I poured cereal and used too much milk and ate standing at the kitchen counter, because sitting at the table alone felt strange. And then I watched cartoons for 3 hours until my grandmother arrived to stay with me. Emma came home 6 weeks later, small in a way that seemed impossible, her hands the size of my palm, her whole body performing the work of breathing with a visible effort that scared me every time I watched her chest rise and fall. My mother explained once carefully what premature meant and what it might mean for Emma's future. There were words I didn't fully understand: cardiac, developmental, vulnerable. There was a list of things to watch for. There was a monitor that sometimes beeped in the night. I learned to listen for the beep. Nobody asked me to, I just did. By the time I was 10, I had internalized a set of responsibilities that I could not have articulated, but that governed my behavior completely. I walked Emma to kindergarten and back. I stayed close to her at the playground. If she fell, I was there before she cried. If she seemed tired, more tired than seemed normal, which was a distinction I had developed a sensitivity for, I told my mother, who would call the doctor, who would usually say she was fine. She was usually fine, but usually is not always. And I was 10 years old, and the stakes, as I understood them, were life and death. My parents worked. My mother did the books for a small contracting company. My father managed a warehouse distribution center with hours that were never entirely predictable. They were not absent in the way that some parents are absent. They were there, they were present. They cooked dinner most nights and attended school events when they could. But the household had a particular gravitational arrangement, And what it pulled toward, always, was Emma. Not unkindly, not obviously, just consistently. If there were two things happening at once, one of them involving Emma, the one involving Emma was the thing that mattered. If there was a decision to be made about the weekend or the evening or the summer, Emma's needs were the variable everything else arranged itself around. And increasingly, I was the instrument through which those needs were met, because I was there, and I was reliable, and I had learned to be. "You're so good with her," my mother told me, regularly, in the tone that people use when they want something to continue. I was good with her. I didn't think to wonder why it was my job to be. The warnings started when I was around 12, not from doctors, not from anyone who had clinical authority over the situation, from my parents, in the particular language they used for things they wanted me to take seriously. "Emma's condition could change anytime, Ethan. You understand that. If she has an episode when we're not home, you know what to do. Your sister needs consistency. She needs routine. She needs to know someone reliable is always close." And then, the phrase that became, over years, something like a family koan. "If something happens to your sister, you'll never forgive yourself." It was not a threat. I want to be clear about that, because the memory of it feels threatening now. But at the time it felt like love, like information, like something I was being trusted with because I was old enough and responsible enough to hold it. The idea that Emma's survival was connected to my proximity was presented to me the way you present a child with any serious adult truth, carefully, with repetition, with the implicit understanding that accepting it was a form of maturity. I accepted it. I was 12 years old. I wanted to be mature. By high school, I had stopped thinking of it as a sacrifice. You can't sacrifice something you no longer remember having. I didn't go to parties because Emma had a doctor's appointment the next morning. I didn't join the debate team because practices ran late and someone needed to be home. I had friends, but they were the kind of friends you see at school and not outside it, because outside it I had different obligations. I dated twice, once briefly in sophomore year, once for longer in junior year, and both times it ended in a version of the same conversation, which was that I was unreliable in a specific way, always half present, always potentially about to leave. I didn't argue with that. It was accurate. What I remember most from those years is not resentment. I want to be honest about that, because resentment would be the cleaner emotion, the more narratively satisfying one. What I remember is something more like a persistent low-grade guilt. The guilt of a person who is constantly aware that they are the last line of defense against something terrible, and who occasionally, secretly, wishes they weren't. I never told anyone that. The wishing felt like a kind of violence. The letter arrived in April of my senior year, a full scholarship to the University of Washington architecture program, which was what I'd applied for partly because I liked drawing, partly because it was practical, and partly because the act of applying at all had felt like a small, private rebellion I could contain. I stared at it for a long time. I told my parents at dinner. My mother's face did something complicated. My father set down his fork and said that was wonderful, that I must be proud, that they were proud. These were the right things to say, and he said them. And then there was a silence during which Emma, who was 9 years old and eating across the table, sneezed twice, and my mother's attention moved toward her with the speed and completeness of a compass needle finding north. 2 weeks later, my father sat with me in the living room after dinner and said he wanted to talk. He was not a man who spoke carefully as a general rule, but that evening he was careful. He said he didn't want to influence my decision. He said this was my choice, and they would support whatever I chose. He said he just wanted to make sure I'd thought about what it would mean for Emma to have me that far away. He said, "Your sister has her good stretches, Ethan, but you've seen the bad ones. You know how fast things can change." He said, "Nobody's saying you can't go." He said, "We just want you to think about what happens if something goes wrong and you're in Seattle." I thought about it. I thought about Emma at 9 years old, small and still not quite sturdy seeming, still the person I'd spent most of my life learning to protect. I called the university the following Monday. I thanked them and declined. My parents said they understood what I'd given up. They said I was a good brother. My mother cried. My father shook my hand in the particular way men of his generation shake hands when they don't trust themselves to say the thing they actually feel. And somewhere in the house, barely audible through the wall, I heard them exhale. Not relieved, I told myself. Just settling. I didn't examine it further. I was 18 years old, and I had just made the first of many decisions that would not feel like sacrifices until I finally understood what I had been sacrificing them for. The years after the scholarship have a particular texture in my memory. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just compressed. The way time compresses when you are moving through it without landmarks, without the markers that separate one chapter from the next. I worked. I helped. I stayed. And the calendar pages turned with a speed that I did not register until much later, when I looked back and realized that an entire decade had passed while I was busy making sure everything was fine. I got a job at a local architecture firm, small, residential projects mostly, the kind of work that was solid and respectable and nowhere near what the University of Washington program might have led to. I told myself it was temporary. I would save money. I would figure something out. I would find a way to build toward the career I'd imagined, without leaving behind the people who needed me. I was 28 before I stopped saying that to myself. Not because I'd given up, exactly. Because somewhere in the years between 18 and 28, the temporary had calcified into permanent without my noticing. The way ice forms on a window not all at once, but by degrees. Until one morning you look up and you can't see through it anymore. Emma's medical appointments ran on a schedule I managed from a shared calendar on my phone. This was not something I had been formally asked to do. It was something I had started doing at some point. I couldn't have said exactly when, because our mother forgot things when she was busy, and our father had never been the kind of person who tracked dates naturally. And Emma at 12, at 14, at 16 was not yet someone who could manage her own healthcare logistics. So I did it. I confirmed appointments. I rescheduled when they conflicted with school. I kept a running list of her medications, their dosages, the dates when refills were due. I drove her when my parents couldn't. I sat in waiting rooms and read the same magazines about home renovation and celebrity interviews, and answered the same questions from nurses who assumed, each time, that I was her father. "Brother," I would say. "Oh," they would say, and note something in the chart. I never thought to ask what they were noting. My parents' relationship to these responsibilities evolved gradually, in a direction that I did not examine clearly until much later. What I can tell you is that by the time I was in my mid-20s, something had shifted in the household's arithmetic. My parents worked less than they used to. My father had taken an early retirement package from the warehouse. My mother had gone part-time. This was reasonable. They were in their 50s. They had worked hard. They deserved to ease off. What they eased off into was not, precisely, more involvement with Emma. My mother developed a passion for travel that she'd apparently been saving up for most of her adult life. Sedona in February, the Oregon coast in summer, a 2-week trip to Portugal that she talked about for months beforehand and months afterward. My father joined her on most of these. The man who had once said the words, "Your sister needs consistency," now spending long weekends away, with a frequency that would have seemed remarkable to the version of me who had declined a scholarship in part because of those words. They were not negligent. They called. They checked in. They asked, from hotels and rental houses and beachside restaurants, how Emma was doing, how things were at home, whether everything was under control. Everything was always under control. Because I was there, I don't think they made a conscious decision about this. I want to be fair to them, or try to be, because fairness is something I have had to work at in relation to my parents in a way I did not anticipate. I think what happened was simpler and more ordinary than a decision. They discovered that their absence had no consequences, that the system functioned without them, that Ethan would handle it. And so they were absent more, and Ethan handled it, and the system went on functioning. Her name was Lauren. We met at a work event, a colleague's birthday dinner at an Italian place on 4th Street, the kind of gathering I almost didn't attend because Emma had seemed off that week, more tired than usual, and I wasn't sure I should be far from my phone. I went anyway. I sat across from a woman who laughed at the right moments and ordered the wrong wine and didn't apologize for either. And by the end of the evening, I had asked for her number with an ease that surprised me. We dated for 14 months. They were the best 14 months of my 30s. She was a high school history teacher, patient in the way that good teachers are patient, not passively, not as a performance, but as a genuine orientation toward understanding before judgment. She asked questions about my life without making me feel interrogated. She listened to the answers with real attention. It was the listening that undid me, eventually. Because when someone listens carefully enough, you start to hear yourself. About 8 months in, on a Sunday morning in her apartment with coffee going and the windows fogged from the rain, she said, not accusatorially, just observationally, "You've canceled on me 4 times in the last 2 months because of your sister. 3 of those times, everything turned out to be fine." "It could have not been fine," I said. "Could have," she said, "but wasn't." She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite classify. "Ethan, when did a doctor last tell you specifically what Emma's condition is? Like the name of it, the prognosis, what it means for her long term?" I opened my mouth. I closed it. The honest answer was that I could not remember a doctor ever framing it to me that way. What I had were years of appointments and refills and monitoring, a general atmosphere of medical vigilance, the accumulated weight of concern. I did not have a diagnosis I could name clearly. I did not have a prognosis. I had a feeling, deep and structural and old, that Emma was fragile and that my proximity was part of what kept her from breaking. "I know what she has," I said. "It's complicated." Lauren nodded slowly. She didn't push it. She was too smart to push it, but something had been loosened, very slightly, in a way I wouldn't be able to ignore entirely no matter how much I wanted to. We ended 6 months later, not dramatically, not with a fight or a revelation or a defining moment. It ended the way things end, when 2 people have reached the limit of what they can do for each other, gradually. And then with a conversation that named the thing they'd both been circling for a while. She said, "I feel like I'm always competing with something I can't see." I said, "That's not fair to Emma." She said, "I know, but it might be fair to me." I didn't have an answer to that. She was right, and I knew she was right, and I also couldn't change it, couldn't imagine changing it. So the thing ended, and I drove home and sat in my apartment and felt the particular loneliness of a person who has lost something and cannot blame anyone for it. Certainly not Emma. Emma hadn't done anything. Emma never did anything. That was what made it so hard to name. Sometime around my 34th birthday, I started keeping a private accounting, not of what I'd given. I didn't think of it in those terms, more of what things cost. A habit from work, from years of estimation and budgeting, the instinct to understand where resources were going. I had contributed to Emma's rent for 3 years, from when she'd moved into her first apartment at 23 until she'd stabilized, or what everyone called stabilizing, which meant that her financial situation had evened out to a point where she could manage mostly, with occasional help. I had paid for 2 medical procedures that insurance hadn't covered. I had spent, over the course of a decade, somewhere in the neighborhood of $40,000 on things I could itemize and other things I couldn't. But those were the numbers. The non-numbers were harder. The non-numbers were the job offer in Denver that I'd received at 31 and never seriously considered because it was too far. The year I'd spent in therapy slowly, reluctantly examining why I was 32 years old and had never lived more than 12 miles from my parents' house. The Tuesday evenings I'd spent driving Emma to appointments while people my age were. I didn't always know what they were doing. Building things, maybe. Moving through a version of life that had forward momentum. I don't know. I wasn't there. Emma, for her part, was not a villain. I want to be absolutely clear about this, because the story I'm telling has a shape that makes it easy to assign roles, and the role nearest the center of the damage is not hers. She was sweet. She was funny in a dry, understated way that people who met her rarely expected. She was also, by her late 20s, someone who had never fully learned to be alone, not because she was incapable of it, but because she had never been required to develop that capacity. There was always someone. There was always me. She called me most days, sometimes just to talk, sometimes with specific needs, a ride, a question about a bill, a moment of anxiety that had crested and needed somewhere to go. I answered. I helped. I listened. It felt like love. I'm not sure it wasn't, but I'm also not sure that love and habit are always distinguishable from the inside. She fainted on a Tuesday in September. I was 3 parking spaces away, loading grocery bags into my trunk, when I heard the particular silence that precedes bad news. I turned and she was down, the oranges rolling away from her hand, her face against the asphalt with the kind of stillness that activates every alarm in the body of a person who has spent 30 years watching for exactly this. I was at her side before I thought about it. She was breathing. She was alive. The paramedics were calm in a way I found, in the moment, slightly irritating. Shouldn't they be moving faster? Shouldn't there be more urgency? This was Emma, and then she was on a stretcher and they were loading her, and I was following in my car, calling our parents, hearing my father pick up on the fourth ring, and all of it was so familiar that the familiarity itself felt like a warning. I had done this before. I would do it again. The only variable was how many more times it would happen before I ran out of years left to give. The waiting room at St. Matthew's had the same fluorescent hum as every other waiting room I'd ever sat in on Emma's behalf. I sat. I waited. The doctor came out, younger than me, with Emma's chart in his hand and no particular alarm in his expression. He said she was fine. He said fainting happened. He said he'd been looking at her history. And then he said the thing that cracked the foundation of 30 years in a single sentence. Why do you think your sister is seriously ill? I looked at him. He looked at me. The fluorescent light hummed. I'm sorry, I said. What? He turned the chart toward me slightly, not showing me confidential information, just indicating the shape of what he was reading. Premature birth, early complications, those are real, and they were treated. But I'm looking at the last 2 decades of records here, and I'm not seeing a chronic life-threatening condition. I'm seeing a lot of monitoring for things that seem to have stabilized. He tilted his head. Has anyone ever explained to you, specifically, what her ongoing diagnosis is? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. He waited. He was patient the way doctors learn to be patient when they've said something that requires time to land. And in the silence, I felt something begin, slowly, then faster, then with a momentum I couldn't stop, to come apart. I requested the records that afternoon. It took 20 minutes of paperwork and one conversation with a patient services coordinator who explained the process with the cheerful efficiency of someone who did not understand what this particular stack of paper was about to do to a person's life. I sat in the hospital cafeteria with a coffee I didn't drink and waited while they printed everything. The file was thicker than I expected. I took it to a table in the corner and started at the beginning. Emma Rose Walker, born 8 weeks premature. Weight at birth, 4 pounds, 2 ounces. The early records were dense with medical language. NICU admissions, respiratory monitoring, feeding complications, the careful clinical tracking of a small body learning to do the things bodies are supposed to do automatically. This part I knew. This part matched the story I'd been told. I read slowly. She was discharged from the NICU after 31 days. There were follow-up appointments every 3 months for the first 2 years. The notes were cautious, as early pediatric notes tend to be continue monitoring, developmental milestones within acceptable range. Mother reports occasional lethargy, the careful hedging of doctors who had learned that certainty is a liability. Then I reached age 4. A note from the pediatrician, patient presenting well, weight and height tracking normally, respiratory function stable. Previous concerns, Ray, cardiac irregularity have not recurred in 14 months. Recommend standard annual checkups going forward. No specialized monitoring required at this time. I read it twice. I looked up at the cafeteria. A woman at the next table was feeding a toddler crackers, breaking them into small pieces, patient and focused. The toddler kept dropping them. I looked back at the file. No specialized monitoring required at this time. Emma was 4 years old. I kept reading. Age 6, patient in good health. Growth metrics normal. No cardiac concerns. Mother reports child occasionally complains of fatigue. Advised that this is common in children this age and does not indicate underlying pathology. Recommended continued standard care. Age 8, a new doctor, different practice. The note referenced Emma's premature birth history in the way doctors reference history, as context, not as active concern. The assessment at the bottom read, no chronic conditions identified. Patient healthy. Age 10, age 12, age 14. The pattern was consistent across every file, every physician, every year. Emma Walker was a healthy child. Emma Walker had been a healthy child since approximately age 4 or 5, when the genuine complications of her premature birth had resolved the way premature birth complications often resolve slowly, and then completely, and then permanently. What the files did not show was any doctor telling my parents, your daughter's brother no longer needs to structure his life around her survival. What the files showed instead was a family that continued to present Emma as fragile to every new physician, who duly noted the family's concern, monitored accordingly, found nothing, and moved on. And nothing changed. Because at home, nothing had been told. I sat in that cafeteria for a long time, long enough that the coffee went cold, and the woman with the toddler left, and a different family sat down, and the light through the windows shifted from afternoon to early evening. I was thinking about a specific Saturday when I was 16. My mother had called me home from a friend's house. We'd been playing video games, the unremarkable Saturday afternoon of a teenager with nowhere particular to be. Because Emma had a fever and was asking for me, I came home. Emma was in bed with a temperature of 101, which is a fever but not a remarkable one, and she held my hand and fell asleep, and by morning she was fine. I had not thought about that afternoon in years. I was thinking about it now. 101. I had left my friends and come home for 101, and my parents had called me specifically because Emma was asking for me, which meant they had told Emma, had communicated to a child, that I was the person who made things better, that my presence was medicinal. In a way, their presence was not. I thought about what that does to a child. I thought about what it does to both children. Emma was still in the room when I came back upstairs. She was sitting up in the hospital bed, dressed now, waiting for discharge paperwork. She looked fine. She always looked fine, which was something I was going to have to completely recalibrate my understanding of. She looked up when I came in and smiled the way she smiled at me, which was different from how she smiled at other people, warmer and more unguarded. The smile of someone who has been told their whole life that this particular person is safe. I sat down. I put the file on the tray table between us. She looked at it. "What's that?" "Your records," I said. "From here, and from the last 30 years. Something in her expression shifted. Not alarm, exactly, but attention. The way a person looks when they understand that a conversation is about to be different from the conversations that came before it. "I've been reading them," I said, "for the last few hours." She waited. "Emma," I stopped, started again. "When did a doctor last tell you that you had a serious ongoing medical condition?" She blinked. "I mean, I've always had." She stopped. "Had what?" I said, not unkindly, genuinely. She opened her mouth, closed it, and I watched something happen on my sister's face that I had not seen there before. A kind of internal searching. The expression of a person trying to locate something they have always assumed was there and suddenly cannot find. "Mom always said," she started. "I know what Mom said," I said. "I want to know what a doctor said, specifically. The name of a condition, a prognosis, anything clinical." The silence lasted a long time. "They always monitored me," she said finally. Her voice had gone quieter. "There were always appointments." "I know," I said. "I drove you to most of them." She looked at the file. She looked at me. "Ethan," she said, and then nothing else for a moment. "What does it say?" I told her. Not all of it at once. Not the way you'd rip off a bandage. Because this wasn't a bandage situation. This was something that had been load-bearing in both our lives for 30 years, and removing it required care. I told her what the pediatric records showed. I told her what the age 4 assessment said. I told her the pattern I'd found, consistent across decades and physicians. A family that presented concern, doctors who found nothing, notes that showed a healthy child growing into a healthy adult. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, very carefully, "Are you saying I was never sick?" "I'm saying you were sick," I said. "When you were born for the first few years, and then you weren't." She absorbed this. "And nobody told us. Nobody told us." She looked at the window. Outside the hospital, the evening had gone fully dark. The parking lot lights casting everything in that particular amber that makes the ordinary world look slightly unreal. "I used to get scared," she said. "If I got tired, or dizzy, or if my heart felt, I don't know, fast, I'd get scared because Mom always said those could be signs, that I needed to be careful, that I needed," she stopped, "to have someone nearby," I said. She closed her eyes. I watched my sister understand that the fear she had lived with her entire life, the low, persistent hum of it, the sense of her own body as something unreliable and dangerous, had been installed there by the people who were supposed to protect her from fear. She didn't cry. She looked like she was somewhere past crying, in the further territory where the emotions are too large and too complicated for tears to carry them. "I'm sorry," she said. "You don't need to." "I know I don't," she said. I'm saying it anyway. We called our parents that evening. Not from the hospital, Emma was discharged by then, and we sat in my car in the parking structure for a while first, not talking much, just existing in the same space while something enormous resettled around us. Then she said she thought we should do it in person. I agreed. Our parents' house was 20 minutes away. They were both home. My mother had made dinner. She often made dinner when she was anxious, cooking as a form of nervous energy management, and the kitchen smelled like the roast chicken she'd been making since we were children. And for a moment, the smell of it hit me in the chest in a way I hadn't expected, because it was the smell of home. And home was the thing I was currently in the process of dismantling. We sat at the kitchen table. I put the file on the table. My father looked at it. My mother looked at it. Neither of them asked what it was. That told me everything I needed to know about what they already understood. My father spoke first. "Ethan, I've read her records," I said. 30 years of them. I'd like you to tell me what you knew and when you knew it. The silence in that kitchen was different from other silences I had sat in with my parents. It had weight and texture, the particular quality of something that has been maintained under pressure for a very long time, finally reaching the limit of what pressure can hold. My mother said she was sick. She was, I said, in the beginning, and then she wasn't, and you knew. My mother looked at her hands. My father looked at the table. "When did you know?" Emma said. Her voice was quiet and precise. "I want an actual answer." My father said, "The doctor, when you were around 5 or 6, he said you were doing well. That things had stabilized, that we could scale back the extra monitoring. But you didn't," I said. He looked up at me. "You were helping," he said. 3 words, bare and unadorned. You were helping. Not we were scared. Not we didn't trust the doctors. Not even we didn't know what to do. You were helping, as if the continuation of a system that served them needed no further justification than the fact that the system was functioning. My mother, to her credit, said more. "It wasn't a decision," she said, and I believed her, which was almost worse than if she'd been lying. "At first it was just you were there. You were good at it. Emma responded to you in a way she didn't respond to us, and it was easier, and we told ourselves it was temporary, that we'd transition her when she was older, when you were more settled, when..." She stopped. "And then time kept passing. And we kept traveling," my father said, quietly, not as an excuse, as a fact he was apparently unwilling to hide from. "And I kept managing everything," I said. He nodded. "Did it ever occur to you," I said, "to tell me that I didn't need to?" He didn't answer immediately. When he did, what he said was, "I don't think we ever decided you did need to. I think we just never decided you didn't." The question formed in my chest before it reached my mouth, and by the time I said it, my voice was very steady, steadier than I expected. Because I had been steady my entire life, and apparently that was not something that disappeared in a single evening. "If I had taken that scholarship," I said, "if I had moved to Seattle at 18, or Denver at 31, if I had at any point just left." I looked at my parents. What would have happened? My father's jaw moved. My mother's hands, flat on the table, pressed down slightly harder. Emma, beside me, was very still. Nobody answered. The roast chicken smell filled the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car went past on the street, and its headlights swept briefly across the wall. The silence was its own answer, and I think all 4 of us, in that kitchen, understood it at the same time. Nothing would have happened. Emma would have been fine. My parents would have managed. The system would have found its own equilibrium. The only thing that had ever required my specific presence was the belief that my presence was required, and I had believed it for 30 years, because nobody had ever given me a reason not to. I didn't leave that night. I want to be honest about that, because the version of this story that feels most satisfying ends with me standing up from that kitchen table, setting down my keys, and walking out the door into a life that was finally, irrevocably my own. That version is clean. It has the shape of justice. What actually happened is that I drove Emma home, made sure she had water and food and whatever she needed, and then I went back to my apartment and sat on the couch in the dark for a long time. I wasn't angry. That surprised me, the not angry. I had expected anger, had braced for it, almost, the way you brace for a wave you can see coming. What I found instead was something quieter and in some ways harder. Not numbness. More like the specific exhaustion of a person who has been running for 30 years. and has only just now stopped to look back at how far they've come and understand that none of the distance was in the direction they meant to travel. I sat there until 2 in the morning. Then I went to bed. Then I woke up and began the slow, careful work of dismantling a life I had never chosen. The first thing I stopped was the calendar. The shared calendar on my phone, Emma's appointments, her prescription refills, the recurring reminders I had set and maintained and responded to for years. I didn't delete it dramatically. I just stopped checking it, stopped confirming appointments, stopped sending the reminder texts I had been sending so automatically that the motion of typing them had become something my thumbs did without my brain's full participation. Emma called the second week. She said there was a refill she'd missed, and she didn't know how to handle it with the pharmacy. I said, "Call them directly, they'll walk you through it." A pause. "Can you just—" "Emma," I said, not unkindly, "call the pharmacy." Another pause. "Okay," she said. She called the pharmacy. The pharmacy walked her through it. She got her refill. She called me afterward to tell me, and her voice had something in it I hadn't heard there before, a small, quiet note of something that might have been surprise. That she'd done it. That it had been manageable. That the world had not reorganized itself into disaster, simply because I wasn't the one who made the call. "That wasn't that hard," she said. "No," I said, "it wasn't." My parents noticed within 2 weeks. Not the calendar specifically, they didn't have visibility into that, but the effect of it. The appointments that weren't pre-confirmed, the calls that went slightly longer to voicemail than they used to, the general atmospheric shift of a household that had relied, for decades, on a specific gear in its machinery, and was now discovering that gear had quietly disengaged. My mother called on a Thursday evening with a question about Emma's insurance, a billing issue she'd fielded from Emma, and rooted to me with the automaticity of someone who had been routing things to me for so long that the motion was entirely unconscious. I said, "That's something Emma will need to handle with her insurance company directly." A brief silence. "Ethan, it's complicated. She doesn't really understand. She'll figure it out," I said. "Or she can call the insurance company and ask them to explain it. That's what they're there for." "You're beings." "I'm not being anything," I said. "I just can't do it right now." I was, technically, doing nothing right now. I was sitting on my couch watching a documentary about national parks, but can't asterisk felt more honest than asterisk won't asterisk. Because what I couldn't do was continue the motion indefinitely. The automatic reaching out and solving and managing. The reflex that had been so well trained for so long that refusing it felt less like a decision and more like learning to write with a different hand. Difficult, effortful, possible. I found an apartment in April. Not across town, actually across the state. Portland had held me long enough, and long enough had turned out to be my entire adult life. And I was 38 years old and had never lived more than 12 miles from my parents' house. The apartment was in Spokane. I had no particular connection to Spokane. That was partly the point, to choose somewhere not because it accommodated anyone else's geography, but because I had driven through it once and liked the light there in the afternoon, the way it came off the river. That seemed like enough of a reason. I signed the lease in March. I told my parents in April. My mother said, "Spokane." The way she said it, it could have been the surface of the moon. "That's very far," my father said. "Yes," I said. "What about Emma's?" "Emma," I said, "is 30 years old. She's going to be fine." My father looked at me. For a long time. And I understood, in the way you understand things when you have finally stopped needing them not to be true, that he had always known she would be. He had known it for 25 years. He had simply never said so, because saying so would have changed the arrangement, and the arrangement was comfortable. He didn't argue. Neither did my mother. Maybe they understood that there was nothing left to argue with. The mechanism they had relied on had become aware of itself, which is the thing mechanisms aren't supposed to do. Emma came to help me pack. She showed up with coffee and boxes, and didn't offer any version of the conversation I had been half preparing for. No tearful request to stay. No repetition of the old language about need and survival, and what would happen. She put books in boxes, and asked me where I'd found the place, and whether I'd need a truck, or if everything fit in the car. We worked for most of the afternoon, without talking much. At some point, in the kitchen, she stopped wrapping dishes and said, "I've been thinking about therapy." "Yeah, to work through the medical stuff. The anxiety about my health. She looked at the plate in her hands. Apparently, I have some things to unlearn. That seems like a good idea, I said. She nodded. Then she said, I've also been thinking about moving. Not to Spokane, just not where I am. Somewhere I chose because I wanted to be there. I looked at her. She was 30 years old. She was healthy. She had a dry sense of humor and a better eye for other people's feelings than she'd ever been given credit for, because credit had mostly gone to her needs rather than her capacities. That seems like a good idea too, I said. She put the plate in the box. I'm sorry, she said, for the third time. But differently this time, not with the reflexive guilt of someone apologizing for existing, but with the directness of someone who has looked at a situation clearly and understood their place in it. Not for being born early, not for being sick when I was little, but for, she paused, for not asking questions sooner, for not noticing what it was costing you. You were told not to notice, I said. We both were. Still, she said. I said, still, thank you. My parents came to say goodbye the morning I left. It was early, barely light, and they stood on the sidewalk outside my building while I loaded the last of the boxes into the rental car. And my mother handed me food for the drive that was significantly more food than any person needed for a 5-hour drive. And my father stood with his hands in his pockets in the particular way he had of being present without quite knowing what to do with himself. I hugged my mother. She held on longer than usual. I shook my father's hand, and then, because it seemed necessary and also true, I hugged him too. He said quietly against my shoulder, I know we made mistakes. I said, I know. We love you, he said. That was always real. I thought about this. I know that too, I said. And I did. Both things were real. The love and the damage. They always had been. The love did not excuse the damage. The damage did not erase the love. Both things simply were, the way certain things simply are. And what you do with that depends on whether you have the capacity left to hold complexity, without needing it to resolve into something simpler. I wasn't sure I had that capacity yet. I was working on it. The last conversation happened over dinner, 2 weeks before I left the 4 of us at a restaurant. One of those evenings that everyone understood was a marker of some kind, without anyone saying so. My mother said, at some point, that they had done what families do. She said it without defensiveness, almost quietly, as if it were a sufficient explanation. I said, no. She looked at me. You did what was easiest, I said. For you, there's a difference. My father started to say something. I said, I'm not saying this to punish you. I'm saying it because I think you know it's true, and because I spent 30 years not saying true things in this family, and I'm not able to do that anymore. No one spoke for a moment. Then my mother said, you're right. Just that. No elaboration. No qualification. You're right. It was the most honest thing she had said to me in 30 years, and it landed somewhere in my chest, not with the satisfaction I might have expected, but with a kind of grief, for the conversations we might have had, for the version of our family that might have existed if honesty had been more available to us, for the 30 years that you're right had been waiting to be said. I didn't cry. I ordered dessert. We sat together for another hour and talked about other things, and it was almost normal. And the almost was something I was learning to accept. I've been in Spokane for 7 months now. The afternoon, light off the river, is exactly what I remembered. My apartment is small and quiet and entirely arranged according to my own preferences, which I am still in the process of discovering, because it turns out that 38 years of orienting your life around other people's needs leaves you with some genuine uncertainty about your own. I like the windows. I like the silence in the mornings. I've started drawing again, architectural sketches, the way I used to before I stopped having time for things I did for no reason other than that I liked them. Emma calls twice a week now instead of every day. Her voice sounds different, more settled, less reflexively anxious. She started therapy in February. She got a job at a nonprofit and seems to find it meaningful. She mentioned last week that she'd been hiking alone. I told her that was great. She said, it was kind of great. My parents call on Sundays. The conversations are shorter than they used to be and more honest, which is a trade I find acceptable. I don't know yet what I'm rebuilding toward. I know that I'm 38 years old and have never, not once in my adult life, made a significant decision based entirely on what I wanted. I know that learning to do that is not immediate, is not clean, is not the triumphant transformation that the story deserves but doesn't quite get. I know that the phone can be silent for an entire evening, and I can sit with that silence without panic. That sounds small. It is not small. The night I moved into this apartment, boxes still unpacked, furniture at odd angles, the overhead light too bright, and the refrigerator making a sound I hadn't investigated yet. I sat on the floor and held my phone and realized I was waiting for it to ring, waiting for the need, waiting for the emergency that would tell me where to direct myself. It didn't ring. I sat there in the too bright light, in the apartment I had chosen for no reason except that I liked the river, and I waited. And then, slowly, I stopped waiting. And what came into that space, where the waiting had been, was not loneliness, though I had expected loneliness. It was something quieter, something that took me a long time to identify, because I had so little previous experience with it, something that felt, cautiously and imperfectly, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, like mine.